everyone, and welcome to We Go Back. I'm your host, Bryan Abou Chacra, and on this week's episode, we will be reviewing Enter 7-7 and Par Avion, the 11th and 12th episodes from Season 3 of Lost. We open to the beach where Sawyer, looking for Kate, is not able to find her. She's out looking for Jack, but instead runs into Hurley, who is setting up a ping pong game for everybody on the beach, which really brings to Sawyer's point a bigger issue that he's had since he came back, which is everybody sharing his things. They all took his stash, he's really unhappy with it, addresses Paolo, but once he realizes what Paolo is doing with his stuff, walks away angrily. This takes us to the jungle, where Kate, Sayid, John, and Rousseau have found the flame hatch after some contention over what their bearing was actually leading them to. And I love this exchange here because in this scene, Sayid ends up being the one that finds the cow while they're picking fruits. Really interesting, think that that's great, but they see the man from the Pearl monitoring station, and he's living up or staying at this hatch. This takes us back to the beach, where they set up the ping pong table, and Sawyer still has it stuck in his craw about his stuff. He doesn't care about anything that they've done, but he proposes that he will play them for his stash. If he wins, he gets everything back, but if he loses, and I love that Sun's the one that comes up with this, he can't use any nicknames to anybody for a week. And what this is really bringing to the whole story of Lost here is this great contrast between the two stories going on specifically in this episode, on the beach and with the people who are out there pushing the buttons and trying to get Jack back. I think that this is such a great contrast in the two stories because one is so tense and so heavy, and they're at this flame station and seeing all this crazy stuff, while on the other one, it's Sawyer trying to get his stash back, and they're doing it over a game of ping pong. Really, really love that this is how we're going to go into this episode. Really fun. This takes us back to the jungle, where they do a recon on this communications building that they found, and Rousseau admits that she has actually never been here, and that avoids all encounters like this. I like the way Rousseau's thinking. She leaves, she bounces, she knows what's up. She has lived long on this island by avoiding these people. She seems to know that that is the way to go. I mean, if she's lived here for that long, you gotta maybe trust her advice here. So Sayid goes in regardless of her warning. This takes us to our flashback, where we see Sayid is working at a restaurant in Paris. He gets called out and complimented by a man who seems to know that he's Iraqi. He lays it out, tells Sayid that he needs a cook because his just quit. We now return to Sayid, who's walking up to the flame station. He seems to notice that something is off about this horse that's tied up, and the camera lingers on this shot of a cat for a little too long, and this definitely comes back at the end of the episode. But in that moment, Sayid gets shot, and this man starts yelling about not crossing the line, and this is his line, and all of this crazy stuff, and Sayid is trying to tell him who he is, and actually tells him honestly that he is a survivor of Flight 815, and as this guy comes out to give him aid, they ambush him. They take him inside, and they find out that he is the last surviving member of the Dharma Initiative. He tells everyone that he's a Soviet doctor and that he's seen some field experience, and they go inside his house. He is actually going to dress Sayid's wound. Mikhail tells the story of how he got on the island, and he tells them what this station was meant to do. It is there to communicate with the outside world, but it hasn't worked in years. During all of this, Locke finds a game of chess on the computer, and the pieces for that game that he plays are black and white. While Locke plays his game, Mikhail continues, and he tells them about the Purge and how he is the only survivor because he did not participate in it. And he keeps telling them, we are just finding so much information about what happened on this island, but we find out that the hostiles have been here for a very, very long time. What a crazy scene that we're seeing here, but at the same time, we kind of have to question whether or not this guy is telling the truth. We have seen so much deceit from these people, and we know that the others do have control of other stations on the island, so it's very possible that they do have control of this one as well. So what do we believe? It does all sound very true, but so did everything Henry was saying in the previous season. So it's good that Saeed is here to decipher it all. This takes us to our flashback where Saeed goes to the restaurant and actually gets set up. This woman is brought in and she just seems to stare at Saeed with hatred in her eyes. Really intense scene, and you can see really quickly that this turns really poorly for Saeed very fast. We jump back to the flame station where Mikhail actually gets the bullets out and we find out about his little cat. She seems to share the name with the woman who Saeed has in his past, in his flashback. I'll just go ahead and bring that out here so we don't have to dance around the issue. If you didn't notice it the first time, same exact name as the woman who he is being tortured in proxy by. And he seems to get tortured a lot in his life. For somebody who is also a torturer, you would figure he would avoid that. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe that's just me. You tell me. We return to Locke, who is still playing the game, but Mikhail advises him that the computer cheats. But a really interesting point here, while Locke is playing now the second game that has black and white pieces, he talks about how humans are the only people who can cheat, or the only things that can cheat. Computers cannot cheat. They are bound by a set of rules, and that is the distinction. This takes us back to Saeed and Kate, where he reveals to her that he knows they aren't alone in this place and that he's just been playing with this guy the entire time. He noticed from the tack of the horse outside, it's for a much shorter person. And I love the look on Kate's face when she realizes that absolute horror and the look in her eyes. I love it. This takes us back to the beach where Hurley wants to know if they'll set up a mercy rule for the game of ping pong they end up playing. This is great going back in hindsight and talking about it, even knowing the outcome of the game. Really fantastic considering Hurley gets the 1-0 hot shot to start the game off. Really fantastic. Love, again, the difference between the main story and the B story on the beach. It takes you away, and you're kind of still interested in what goes on. There's stakes with this game about nicknames and Sawyer getting his stuff back. You're actually invested in these characters because you care about them, but at the same time, you definitely care a lot more about learning all this new stuff going on with Kate, Saeed, Locke, and Rousseau, wherever she's run off to. So let's jump back to them, where they maintain their cool when Mikhail comes back with their tea, but Mikhail knows right away, turns very quickly, and it's just a great realization between the two, where Mikhail says, why do we keep continuing to play this silly little game when we know it's gone to the next level? They get into a big old fight. Really awesome scene. Lost does its action so well, and then it backs it up with some great comedy. Freaking Locke comes in with his gun 2 seconds after everything goes down. So funny. It's like, how could you be that late to something so important? Didn't you hear everything going down? Anyway, this takes us to our flashback where we see that Saeed has been made prisoner, just like Ben was in the hatch. And this man is accusing Saeed of torturing his wife. Says that he wants Saeed to admit to what he did or he will leave there dead. Man, what has Saeed done in his life to bring all of this kind of stuff onto him? I mean, it's pretty intense, the stuff that we've seen him go through in this show. It's unbelievable. Compared to some of the other characters, he's really gone through a lot of emotional turmoil. This takes us back to the flame, where they are tying up Mikhail, and Saeed tells him about how he knew that somebody else was there. Like I mentioned, he was able to notice that the tack on the horse was for somebody much shorter. And by the way, in the midst of all of this, I want to point out that Saeed's bickering with John about the bearing earlier was totally wrong, because it's what got them to the station. That's the only reason they found this. They found that bearing that was on Mr. Echo's stick, and the bearing was right. I just totally overlooked that until just this moment I realized that's what got them here. And I did want to switch gears and bring up something that's actually on the special features of the DVD and Blu-ray collections. It's got one of the best bloopers when they're talking about searching every nook and cranny of this place. Saeed's response has a great outtake. You just have to look it up. I'm not going to imitate it. It's not going to do it justice. Please check it out. This takes us back to our flashback where Saeed gets beat the ever-living hell out of him and told to admit to what he's done to this woman. And the woman is actually the one who stops her husband in this scene. And Saeed continues to maintain his innocence just like Ben did in the hatch. Back to the flame, they find that the entire basement of this flame station is lined with C4 around the entire foundation. And while Kate and Saeed are down in this basement trying to discover where the other person is, Locke goes back to playing chess. Don't know what his infatuation with the game is, but we do know from his admission to Jack in season 1, he does love playing games. Maybe this is what he means. He also played Mousetrap when he worked at that fake Costco store earlier in season 1 or 2 as well. So maybe he really does enjoy playing games. We've seen him play a lot of them. Either way, Saeed is able to find a locker filled with binders, which have a bunch of Dharma information on them, and then while this is happening, John actually is able to win the game of chess, and a video comes up. It's Dr. Marvin Wickman, or whatever this candle-inspired name is, and he's asking about an incursion on the island by the hostiles, and he says, if this happens, you should press 7-7. But before John is able to, Mikhail comes up with a knife to his throat, and god damn it, John, you're supposed to be watching this guy while they do recon. You're in his space. Why are you letting him loose just to play your game of chess? Down in the basement, Kate and Saeed get the drop on Miss Clue and bring her out to the surface, and we now have a standoff. It's John versus Mrs. Clue, and they both have hostages, and they have to decide who's going to go. They want to trade each other off, but she yells, Miss Clue yells at Mikhail in Russian. She tells him, I believe what equates to he knows what he must do, and he is refusing to do it, but he reluctantly shoots her and then tries to kill himself, puts the gun up to his head and gets stopped. They choose not to kill him, and this takes us to Sawyer on the beach. We find out that Sawyer has gotten his butt kicked by Hurley, but this really wasn't his issue. And Hurley, again, is able to really read the root of the problem and knows that Sawyer is just worried about Kate and tells her that she is going to be fine, or tells him that she is going to be fine. And I love this exchange here. Sawyer still can't let his harsh side go and tells Hugo, uses his real name for the first time, to get bent. Really nice scene. Love the way that this part of the episode ends, again, in the midst of everything that's happening over in the flame, which we will return to right now. We see Locke continuing to play this game of chess after they finally subdued Mikhail again, and Saeed is telling them that he has the ticket to the other's camp, pulls out a schematics, and knows how to get to the others now. Again, because of the bearing they followed. Really want to drive that point home. The 305 bearing from Echo Stick, really awesome. But Saeed has figured out where the others lived, and that's not why he's keeping Mikhail alive. I think that is explained in the flashback where Nadia comes in with the cat, and this whole part keeps up with the reoccurring theme and the association of animals with characters in the show. Just like Kate and Sawyer, we now have Saeed with this cat. The cat looks exactly like the one at the flame station and has the same name as the woman who she's being held by. And she describes how she was traumatized because of Saeed. Only she asks that he acknowledge what he did and that he remembers who she is. And Saeed admits to what he did to her, finally, after everything that he's gone through in this episode. And he apologizes genuinely and really openly to her, which to all of our surprise, she forgives him. And she will tell her husband to release him and that he's not the man that he thought he was. Because unlike how Saeed was and how these kids were in that day, people who were made to be horrible, she will not be like that. And I think that's what this cat is signifying to Saeed here, which takes us back to the jungle where we see that Saeed is choosing not to kill him because he is going to decide his fate. While this happens, Locke comes out and then the flame station blows up in the background and he says all that he did was press the numbers 7-7 like it says in the video. And that's why Mikhail Didn't want him to press it? We don't know. Before they depart and go on their journey, Saeed looks back and sees the cat again. Just like Kate and Sawyer had in previous seasons where they had seen animals in their lives and it was a way almost as a forgiveness for past sins. This brings us into Par Avion, which means by airplane in French, just in case you guys were wondering. We open up to a flashback of Claire, who has been in a horrible accident with her mom, and she's crying. Her mom seems to be unresponsive. This takes us to the beach, where Charlie has prepared a great day with Claire. He wants to seize the day with her, and it's great to finally see Charlie come out of his shell and realize this whole death thing is not going to affect him, take his time with Claire, and have a good time. This brings us to the jungle, where everyone is very tense about Mikhail being with them. They're all 50-50. Half of them believe that they should shoot the man and leave him there. The others say that that's not what they should do, and they press on. We return to the beach, where Desmond approaches Charlie just as he's about to go out on his day with Claire to go boar hunting with him. And we can tell it gets super awkward when Desmond tries to communicate that he should spend the day in a better way with Desmond so that he basically doesn't die. But while all of this is going on, Claire sees birds fly over and realizes that this is a way that they could get off the island. She runs off to try to find Jin, Sun, and Sawyer to get them to help her, and explains that the birds are tagged, and because of that, they can be tracked. But all of a sudden, Charlie seems like he doesn't care anymore, and he starts to question how she knows any of this stuff. And she brings up that great point of, Charlie, what's going on? In the morning you wanted to seize the day, and all of a sudden, you look like you just saw a ghost. And given the circumstances and what we know about Charlie's situation, Desmond probably told him what is going on, or he realized that's why Desmond was telling him what was going on, and that has put him back in his funk. We return to the flashback where a cop is interrogating Claire just after the accident, and she asserts her innocence. She says it wasn't her fault, but the guy never implied it. And I think that's really meant to communicate something about where where Claire is in her mind at this point, that she feels some sort of guilt towards what happened to her and her mom. We now have another relationship with somebody's parental figure, and it's somehow damaged. In this case, it's literally by a car accident, and she assumes some sort of responsibility here. And I think that's really the point of them pointing this scene out. We'll go back to the jungle now, where Kate brings up Alex to Danielle and wonders why she hasn't brought any questions up about the daughter that she's lost for the last 16 years. And I really love Danielle putting her in her place here, puts Kate right in her place. She says, if you would have seen Jack after 16 years, but you knew that he wouldn't remember you and have no idea who you were, would you have a bunch of questions? What would you even know? This person would basically be a stranger to you, and that's what she's trying to say. What kind of questions can I ask that are going to be better than me just meeting her for the first time? That's how I took it. We now return with Kate to Mikhail, and she's interrogating him about the others and where they are, and he tells her that they can go to and from the island, but not anymore. And he really actually gives up a lot of information to Kate here, really more than you would expect. But again, can you even trust the thing this guy says? He has lied about everything. We know that Ben has lied, but the way he's talking about it, he seems fairly open to give this information. He tells Kate that she is not capable of understanding, and that Ben is not the reason why they are all here, that there is a list that she is not on, and he knows who all of them are. He knows all of their names. And this is pretty nuts, because he knows every single thing about these people, but when he comes to John, he says that he has a fleeting memory of him, and that the John Locke he remembers was, and then he gets cut off. And I believe he was saying paralyzed, but we can't say for certain, because they come up on some sort of crazy sonar fence. This takes us onto the beach, where Jin and Claire are working together to try to catch these seagulls. And she and Sun start to have a conversation about their mothers, how Sun's mother never worked a day in her life, and then we can see that the conversation really touches a soft subject for Claire, because she's speaking about her mother in the past tense. And Son absolutely notices that. That's the point. We're supposed to think something happened here. And if you're wondering why she's talking this way, why there's so much emphasis on the scene, why I brought it, we're supposed to hear this and think that Claire's mom is dead and understand that from the conversation. But this takes us into our flashback where Claire goes to see her mother after the accident, a few days after the accident, and she's in bad shape. And we find out that her expenses have been taken care of. Her aunt is there, and she looks very, very familiar, but she seems to have some sort of stick in the mud about Claire and how she doesn't care about her mother. And I think that her aunt is being really hard on her here. I'm not sure why. I think we will find out later in the episode. We now return to the beach where Claire almost catches one of these birds, but just before they spring the trap, Desmond scares them all away. Claire, however, has caught on and she says that something is up and she suspects Desmond and Charlie for not wanting her to catch the birds. This scene really illustrates the kind of character that Claire is. She's always somebody who is very willing to confront people about the issues that she has. She's gone up to Charlie and talked to him directly about stuff. She has done that as well with Desmond here. She knows something is up and she won't let it slide. She's pushed Jack in the first 2 seasons. When she knows something is right, she really can have the motivation to convince people and to push people to their limits. We return to the jungle where we try to figure out how to get over this crazy sonar fence. And as they're arguing about whether or not he'd unlock it or it's been working or what the heck is going on, Locke grabs Mikhail, throws him into the sonar fence. He says thank you and dies. Man, that was pretty brutal. And in the exchange here, John is found to be hiding C4 in his pack, which means that he lied about knowing that the flame was rigged to blow. So does that mean he purposefully blew it up? They say they're going to go over it later, but they don't. We return to the beach with Claire and Charlie. They fight. She really seems to be pushing him away here. And just as I'd mentioned a moment ago, how adamant she can be and convincing she is, she's like a brick wall. You cannot stop her. It's really strange that she's pushing Charlie back here over him not telling her about his situation. I think it's fair because how do you get somebody to understand that Desmond is able to see the future and has told me that I would die if I went to try to help you find these birds? It's kind of hard. You have to play it off in the way that he is. He doesn't want to be lying, but now he's kind of forced to lie. So in this episode, we're also getting a really cool backstory, or not backstory, fill-in for Charlie's character. He's decided not to lie to Claire anymore. But in this situation, he's kind of forced to lie because it's not easy to explain what's going on. Let's go into the flashback where Claire comes to visit her mom and we see Christian is in there with her. We find out an American doctor was there, but Christian Shepherd is the person in the room. And this confirms a whole bunch of theories that people had up to this point. And I mentioned earlier, Claire's aunt looked familiar. That was actually the same woman from season 2 when Ana Lucia took Christian out to Australia. So we find out Claire is Christian's illegitimate daughter. And this is probably why Susan is so upset with both Christian and Claire, because she associates that same hatred and how he left her behind with only her mom and nothing else. This is an intense scene. We get to learn a lot about a lot of these characters in this moment, and it really just brings up and confirms everything that we had been speculating. Let's now jump ahead a few scenes where we return to the flashback, where Christian finds Claire at her work and takes her out for a cup of coffee, and he's suggesting to her that there are other alternatives for her mother's condition, and that there are ways that he could stop her life without the legal repercussions because he knows people out here. And she blows up on him. She doesn't believe that he is there because he wants to take care of her mother. He's there to erase a problem, which is her and her mom. But I really felt like he was being very genuine here because he's talking about hope and false hope. And he doesn't put the arm on the shoulder like he did when he was consoling the husband of the dead woman in the previous season, but rather he's really genuine and chases after Claire to try to get her to understand. But when he realizes that he's not going to be effective, he understands and says goodbye. And he says that it was good to see her. And I feel this scene is really interesting, that Christian, we've always kind of fought between whether or not he's a good father and a bad father. And we're supposed to. I think that's what Christian is struggling with in and of himself. He knows that he can be both a good and a bad father, and he's really only taking care of one half of his responsibility. And that is one of the things I think that weighs on him throughout his entire life. Really enjoy that in this episode, in Claire's episode, we are learning a lot about these supporting characters, Christian and Charlie, through her story. And we do learn that a lot if you pay attention to the details, like seeing Jack in the background when Shannon's father dies. He's been there the whole time. You just didn't notice until you watch it again. And it was really like heart-stopping when you go back and you realize all of the little spots that people were dropped in the past. We now return to the beach where Claire is fed up with all these problems with Desmond and follows him. He goes straight to one of these birds that she's trying to find and picks him up. And she really asserts it now. She's like, I know you know something. You came right here and directly to this spot. You know something. And what I really didn't expect here the first time I watched it, Desmond comes clean with Claire about Charlie. And when she returns to Charlie, she tells him that she knows. And she tells him that he's going to be okay. And this is great, that she's there for him, that she's finally agreeing to let him be fully honest with her, because now Desmond has told her the truth. Love this scene here. Love this exchange between Charlie and Claire. Love seeing them together. This takes us into the flashback where a pregnant Claire visits her mom and she puts on a nature show about birds. So we do know this is where Claire had learned the facts that she knows. She'd mentioned earlier in the episode that she watched a lot of nature shows with her mom. That meant she would come to visit her mom at the hospital all the time and put on these nature shows. So she learned by watching all of these nature shows. Really great point or detail to add into this scene here. Love it. But the point of this scene is that she's going to tell her mom that she's pregnant finally, and that she's going to give the baby away. She apologizes for the accident and apologizes for everything. And we now can get a sense that this is immediately before the crash, because this is her farewell. She's letting her mom know that she was pregnant, but she's giving the baby away. So we now have the points leading up to Claire getting on flight 815, a lot closer to it at least. We now return to the beach where Charlie reads the note that Claire has written for the bird to fly away with. And we find out they've now been on the island for 80 days. It's a nice little point. It is one of the numbers, of course, but it's just nice to know the timeline of where they're at. And Claire, again, just tells Charlie it's going to be okay. And then the birds fly over. And as we get that pan over shot, we meet the other group in the jungle. They come up on the other's camp. And this ending was so intense. We see them. Jack's running away. We all believe the same thing that Kate does, that he's actually trying to run away. But really, he's playing football with Tom. And then he spikes the ball. Man. Next week's episodes, guys, are going to be so crazy because what happened to him? What could make Jack agree to do anything with these people? We've seen how he was, and we hadn't seen him since in these past few episodes. And what changed his mind? What made him go with these guys and be able to be friendly with them? We will find out in next week's episodes. We will be reviewing The Man from Tallahassee and Exposed. Guys, email me your thoughts, questions, theories, everything. Love the people who are emailing me every week with your thoughts and questions. Makes me think, makes me look at stuff differently. I really appreciate it. That's at wegobackpodcast@gmail.com. And then you guys can also follow me on Twitter at KingLordBryan. And we will see each other next week, or you will hear from me next week. So I will see you then, folks. Oh, you will hear me then.